Most of us have heard about Lockheed Martin. They're a defense contractor that works with the US military and NASA. But if you don't follow the military too closely, you may be shocked hearing how big the company really is. Today, Lockheed Martin is worth about $108 billion, employing a massive 110,000 employees. What's even more surprising though is that roughly 75% of their entire revenue comes from one source, the US government. In fact, they won nearly $40 billion from the US government in 2020 alone. So, how was Lockheed Martin able to grow into the US government's right-hand man? Well, the story of Lockheed Martin dates back over 100 years to 1912. Two brothers named Allan and Malcolm Lockheed were an everyday auto mechanic living paycheck to paycheck. Though money was tight, they were always able to find a bit of money to spend on their hobby, which was building a seaplane that they could use in the nearby San Francisco Bay. This process, however, would be significantly pushed forward after they convinced an investor named Max Mamlock to invest into their plane. Max Mamlock was a local businessman who owned a company called the Alco Cab Company. The Lockheed brothers would convince Max that there was a sizable market looking for airplane rides and tours. So, in 1912, Max would go ahead and create a new company called the Alco Hydro Aeroplane Company with $4,000. That's the same as about $108,000 today. After taking this investment in, the brothers were able to really push forward the development of their Model G airplane. During the following year, on June 15, 1913, Allan Lockheed would make his first successful flight in the Model G, flying from the Golden Gate to the San Francisco Bay. That same day, Allan would complete two more successful flights with the Model G. Despite this rapid start though, not very many people could afford to spend $10 or $271 today to go on a joyride in an airplane. Also, the people who could afford it didn't really trust the plane. Henry Ford apparently stated, quote, "I would not take even a straightaway flight 4 feet above the bay in anybody's airplane for all the money in California." Given this lackluster response from the market, Mamlock would decide to shut down the operations and keep the plane for himself. He had fronted all the capital, so this makes sense. He did give the Lockheed brothers the opportunity to buy the plane from him if they could come up with the $4,000 he invested in the business. As we know though, the Lockheed brothers were more or less broke. So they decided to start mining gold hoping that they could hit it big. They tried this for 2 years, but found very little success in the mining industry. Attempting a more realistic path, the brothers would look for a financier that believed in their business, and this would end up being a French philologist named Paul Meyer. Paul would help the brothers buy the plane from Max in 1915, and the brothers would start a small flying business in the Panama Pacific International Exposition. This exposition attracted over 18 million people to San Francisco, and unlike the citizens of San Francisco, these visitors were extremely interested in taking a flight over the San Francisco Bay. Within just 5 months after starting the business, the brothers would fly 600 passengers, profiting the full $4,000. Realizing that the key to their success was targeting the right demographic, the brothers would move the business to Santa Barbara, where enthusiasm for flying was much higher. The move would be extremely successful, and the Lockheed brothers would even expand to providing commercial flights for movie production and private charter trips. Despite this massive success though, the Lockheed brothers weren't fully satisfied. They had a cash cow on their hands, but their goal was never to become a tourist pilot. The real dream was building aircrafts. Now that the company was making money, they finally had the freedom to step aside and design new planes. In 1916, the company would start work on the F-1 flying boat, and after development was completed, Allan would visit Washington, D.C. looking to sell his plane to the Navy. Unfortunately, Allan would find out that the Navy could only buy planes that were previously approved, so Allan would try his luck with the Army. But before they could transition the F-1 to a land plane, World War I would come to an end. Not only did this kill Lockheed's chances in selling to the Army, but Lockheed would face a much bigger issue. You see, the military had bought an excess amount of planes for World War I, and now that the war was over, the military would sell these planes for dirt cheap. To put this in perspective, Lockheed's newest plane, the S-1, cost $2,500. Meanwhile, the military was selling their planes for $300. Given that it was impossible to successfully compete against these prices, the investors of Lockheed Aircraft would decide to take their profits and shut down the company in 1921. Around the same time, another aviator named Allan and Martin also had a grand vision for manufacturing aircrafts. Just like Lockheed, Martin would start his airplane company in 1912 and name it the Allan and Martin Company. Unlike the Lockheed brothers though, Martin not only had access to capital, but he also had a clear plan. From the very beginning, Martin targeted selling aircraft to the military during World War I, and so he started out building military trainer planes. The famous Wright brothers would actually notice what Martin was doing, and they would jump on the opportunity very early on. In 1916, the Wright Company would offer to merge with the Glenn L. Martin Company, and Martin would accept. However, Martin quickly realized that he far preferred the freedom he had when running his own company, and he would leave the merged company just 1 year later and form a new Glenn L. Martin Company with the help of several American industrialists in 1917. Right after forming the new company, Martin would jump into manufacturing the MB-1 bomber, which was their first major success. The key characteristic that set apart the MB-1 bomber from other aircrafts was its sheer size. The aircraft came in at 10,000 pounds with a 72-foot wingspan. In fact, the aircraft was so big that when Martin and his team flew the aircraft to show it to the US military, the guards at the airport arrested them thinking that they were European bombers. They would only sell 20 of these aircrafts, but for a company that was brand new, that was not bad at all. Moreover, Martin would quickly follow up with the MB-2, which the Army loved. The Army would order 20 right off the bat, and they would follow up with a 110-unit order. Martin would work on fulfilling these orders throughout the 1920s, and after he completed this order, he would actually sell his manufacturing facilities in 1928. Martin wanted to focus on engine technology, so he would use the proceeds from selling his manufacturing facilities to buy a 90% stake in Louis Chevrolet's airplane engine company. Just by looking at the origins of either company, you can see that Martin and the Lockheed brothers had radically different approaches. Martin was extremely goal-oriented and was looking to leverage his airplane knowledge to grow a large company. Meanwhile, the Lockheed brothers really just wanted to earn a nice living working on airplanes. Though they had starkly different approaches, one characteristic that was consistent between the two was persistence. After Lockheed's company was shut down in 1921, he would team up with a brick and tile manufacturer named Freddie Keeler, and he would start the Lockheed Aircraft Company in 1926. This would result in the development of the Vega airplane. The Vega would go on to complete the first successful solo flight around the world in 1933. Both companies would have a bit of trouble during the Great Depression. The companies themselves were doing fine, but the same could not be said about the investors. So, we saw a couple of shifts in investors throughout the 1930s, but given the success of the products put out by either company, they would make it through the 1930s unlike many other aircraft companies, and this put them in the perfect position to manufacture airplanes for World War II. This would be the first time Lockheed got to form a serious partnership with the military, given that they were a bit too late during World War I. Lockheed would end up producing the P-38 Lightning Fighter Interceptor and the P-80 Shooting Star. Both of these aircrafts were icons in World War II. The P-38 was, quote, the only American pursuit plane to remain in continuous production throughout the war. Similarly, the P-80 became the first American jet aircraft to enter service. As for the Martin Company, they weren't quite as successful as Lockheed throughout World War II, but they too sold planes like the B-26 Mirador to the military. The main downfall for the Martin Company was that they were trying to expand into the commercial transport business, and this just wasn't working for them. As a result, after World War II, the two companies would head in different directions. Lockheed had grown into one of the top choices for the US military for aircrafts, so they were easily able to transition to producing transport vehicles for the military like the C-130 Hercules. Throughout the 1950s, Lockheed was able to win a variety of contracts, allowing them to easily breeze through the decade. But things would take a quick turn in the 1960s. Things did start off alright in the 1960s. Lockheed got two major contracts, one for the C-5 Galaxy military transport and one for the L-1011 TriStar wide-body civil airliner. However, both projects would see massive cost overruns and delays. This would put Lockheed in a position where they had plenty of work to do, but they were losing money doing the work, which caused them to take on over $1 billion in debt. To make things even worse, it would be revealed in 1975 and 1976 that Lockheed had actually been bribing foreign officials to buy their aircrafts throughout the 1950s and the 1960s. Throughout that time period, Lockheed had paid out $22 million in bribes. This no doubt severely hurt Lockheed's reputation. Meanwhile, the Martin Company was actually not doing too bad. They did completely stop making aircrafts, but they were able to find a decent amount of success selling missiles and space launchers to the military and NASA throughout the Cold War. They helped NASA build things like the Viking landers and the Magellan spacecraft. Seeing Martin's success outside of aircrafts, Lockheed would decide to focus on their own missiles business, given their burnt reputation with aircrafts. In 1977, they would change their name from the Lockheed Aircraft Company to the Lockheed Corporation. And throughout the 1980s and early 1990s, both Lockheed and Martin would go on an acquisition spree as Cold War tensions started to loosen. Lockheed, for instance, would go ahead and acquire Material Management Systems in 1985, Sanders Associates in 1986, and General Dynamics Fort Worth Aircraft Division in 1993. Concurrently, Martin would purchase General Electric's aerospace business in 1993 and General Dynamics Space Systems Division in 1994. With the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, though, both Lockheed and Martin knew that there was going to be significant downfalls in their respective revenues despite their recent acquisitions. But the CEO of Lockheed Corp., Daniel M. Tellep, had just a solution. On March 19, 1994, he would call the CEO of Martin Marietta and propose a merger of equals. Sure enough, 1 year later, on March 15, 1994, the second and third largest American defense contractors would merge, forming the Lockheed Martin that we know today. At the time, this was more of a survival move rather than a monopolistic move. Little did they know about the turn of events that would follow 2001, which allowed them to dominate the defense contractor space. Since then, Lockheed Martin stock has exploded from $27 after the merger in 1995 to almost $400 today. And that's how Lockheed Martin became the military's right-hand man. Did you guys know about the rich history of Lockheed Martin? Comment that down below. Also, drop a like if you guys thought this video described their past well. And of course, consider joining our Discord community to suggest future video ideas, and consider subscribing to see more questions logically answered. But until then, I'm Hari, and I'll see you guys on the next one.